It was one of those lazy Friday afternoons in Maple Ridge, a quiet little suburb just outside Nashville, Tennessee, where the biggest excitement most days came from kids racing grocery carts in the parking lot of Harlan's Fresh Market. The sky was painted in that sleepy orange that tells everyone it's almost dinner time. Inside the store, everything moved at a comfortable pace. Scanners beeped softly, baskets rolled over smooth tiles, and the faint hum of the refrigerator blended with country music playing over the speakers. At register 3 stood Ethan Myers, a 34-year-old man with an easy smile and a calm voice that could make even the most impatient shopper chill out. He'd been working there for almost 5 years. Everyone loved Ethan, from the older ladies who came in for their weekly groceries to the high school kids who worked part-time after class. He was known for his patience and sense of humor, even when customers acted wild. That day, though, Ethan's patience would be tested in a way he never imagined. It started quietly. Around 4:30, the automatic doors slid open and in marched a woman with purpose in her stride. She looked to be in her mid-40s. Wearing a beige trench coat even though it was almost 80 degrees outside. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her eyebrows were drawn on with the precision of someone who had a lot of opinions and no time for nonsense. Her shopping cart clattered like a warning. The employees noticed her right away. You could just feel when someone brought bad energy through those glass doors. Ethan caught a glimpse of her storming toward the bakery aisle and thought, here we go. Down aisle 8, where all the pastries sat glowing under bright lights, she started inspecting cheesecakes one by one, muttering under her breath. The other customers kept their distance. The store's baker, a sweet woman named Joyce, whispered to Ethan's coworker, "Uh-oh, we got another price checker." From where Ethan stood, he could hear the woman huffing, puffing, and then stomping her foot. The sound echoed like a thunderclap. A moment later, she came marching up to the register, clutching a box of cheesecake like it had personally offended her. Without warning, she slammed it down on the counter. The lid almost burst open. A small puff of powdered sugar rose in the air. "This was just on sale last week," she said loudly, every word sharp enough to cut. "And now it's $11? I refuse to pay that." Ethan blinked. He was used to complaints. Sometimes a customer would fuss over a missing coupon or a bruised apple, but the intensity in her eyes was something else entirely. "Well, ma'am," he said, keeping his tone polite, "nobody's forcing you to." She rolled her eyes so hard it was almost impressive. "No kidding. Nobody makes me do anything. What I'm saying is there should have been a sign saying the sale was ending. You people can't just switch prices and expect customers to take it." Ethan leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice but staying firm. "I don't know where you're used to shopping, ma'am, but that's not really a requirement. And I'm gonna need you to lower your voice a little. We've got families around and you're kind of causing a scene." That was it. Her eyes went wide. Her jaw tightened like a vice. "Who do you think you are? Where's your manager?" As if fate had perfect timing, Ralph, the manager, came walking up right then, holding a clipboard. Ralph was in his 50s, a big guy with a calm demeanor, and the kind of southern drawl that usually diffused tension before it got ugly. He had dealt with everything from runaway shopping carts to customers trying to return eaten rotisserie chickens, but this woman had fire in her eyes. "Ma'am," Ralph said gently, "the cheesecake is $11. You can either pay for it or leave it here. That's your choice." Her nostrils flared. "I'm not going anywhere until I get what was promised to me. This was on sale last week. There was no sign saying it was ending. You owe me a discount." Ralph didn't even blink. "I don't owe you a damn thing," he said, still calm but firmer now. "You can leave my store or I'm calling the police. We've already asked you to lower your voice and you're kind of scaring customers." That was it. Her eyes went wide, her jaw tightened like a vice. "Who do you think you are? Where's your manager?" As if fate had perfect timing, Ralph the manager came walking up right then, holding a clipboard. Ralph was in his 50s, a big guy with a calm demeanor, and the kind of southern drawl that usually diffused tension before it got ugly. He had dealt with runaway shopping carts to customers trying to return eaten rotisserie chickens, but this woman had fire in her eyes. "Ma'am," Ralph said gently, "the cheesecake is $11. You can either pay for it or leave it here. That's your choice." Her nostrils flared. "I'm not going anywhere until I get what was promised to me. This was on sale last week. There was no sign saying it was ending. You owe me a discount." Ralph didn't even blink. "I don't owe you a damn thing," he said, still calm but firmer now. "You can leave my store, or I'm calling the police. We've already asked you to lower your voice, and you're scaring customers." The woman's face turned red, deep tomato red. She clenched her fists, looked like she was about to burst. Ethan had seen anger before, but this was unhinged. While Ralph stood his ground, Ethan quietly picked up the phone behind the counter. He'd seen this dance enough times to know how it ended. He called dispatch, his voice steady, even as the woman started pointing a finger inches from Ralph's chest. For another 2 or 3 minutes, she ranted, her voice rising higher and higher each second. Ethan could hear bits and pieces: false advertising, lawsuit, I pay your salary. Ralph kept repeating, "Ma'am, leave the store." The whole bakery section had gone silent. Even the toddlers in the cart seats were staring. Dispatch told Ethan officers were on their way, and he walked back toward the confrontation. "Ma'am, the officers will be here any minute. You've been asked to leave multiple times. Please just go." That should have been the end of it. But instead, she turned, glared at him with eyes that could cut steel, and hissed, "I'll show you a damn scene." Then she did something none of them saw coming. With one dramatic swing of her arm, she hurled the cheesecake onto the floor. It exploded. Creamy filling splattered across the tiles, crumbs flying like confetti. Gasps rippled through the checkout lanes. She wasn't done. As she stomped toward the exit, she swept her arm across a nearby shelf, sending candy bars and gum packs flying. It was chaos, wrappers fluttering from the air, shoppers backing away. By the time she reached the doors, the red and blue lights were already flashing outside. The automatic doors slid open, and 2 officers stepped in, Officer Daniels and Officer Reed, both regulars at Harlan's Fresh Market. They had seen their share of nonsense, but the sight before them still made their eyebrows shoot up. The woman, now shouting about her rights, was halfway through the parking lot. She was waving her hands and pacing between cars like she was performing for an invisible crowd. The officers calmly approached her, their voices steady. Within minutes, she was in handcuffs, still yelling about injustice and cheesecake. Inside the store, everyone just stood there in stunned silence. Joyce, the baker, peeked around the corner with a mop bucket and said, "Well, guess I know what I'm doing for the next hour." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled. The adrenaline was fading, and the absurdity of it all began to sink in. "All that?" he muttered. "Over $3?" Ralph patted his shoulder. "Some folks just look for a fight," he said. "You did good." By the time the officers came back in to get statements, the woman was sitting in the back of the patrol car, still yelling through the open window. He could hear bits of it, something about suing everyone in the building, about hidden discounts, about respect. Ralph gave his statement first. Ethan went next. It was quick. Just facts, times, what was said. Officer Daniels, scribbling notes, shook his head with a grin. "We'll charge her with disorderly conduct, trespassing, and vandalism. She's lucky nobody got hurt." As they left, Ethan looked through the glass doors at the patrol car pulling away. The woman's face was pressed against the window, her mouth still moving. Somewhere deep down, he almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When he got home that night, his wife Lena was already in her robe, watching TV in the living room. She looked up as soon as he walked in and saw the exhaustion on his face. "Tough day?" she asked. "You could say that," he said, dropping onto the couch beside her. we had a woman lose her mind over a cheesecake. Like, how bad? She asked. He hard laughed softly. She threw it on the floor, then trashed the candy aisle. Police had to drag her out. Lena blinked, then laughed so hard she had to put down her mug. You're joking. I wish, he said, rubbing his temples. It was like a tornado in human form. They both sat there laughing until tears rolled down their cheeks. Not because it was funny exactly, but because sometimes laughter's the only way to process how absurd the world can be. Later that night, Ethan scrolled through his phone before bed. Someone had already posted about the incident on the local community page. Crazy lady arrested at Harlan's Fresh Market for cheesecake tantrum. The comment section was already full of jokes, memes, and disbelief. By the next morning, Maple Ridge had a new obsession. The cheesecake incident, as people were now calling it, spread faster than wildfire through town gossip and Facebook posts. Someone who'd been in the store during the chaos had filmed it. Not the whole thing, but just enough to catch the woman screaming, "I'll show you a damn scene," right before she threw the cheesecake. The short clip hit the local Facebook group, Maple Ridge Community Watch, before sunrise. By noon, it had been shared over 1,500 times. People added captions like, "This is why we can't have nice things," and "Imagine going to jail over dessert." At Harlan's Fresh Market, the staff was already joking about it before the first customers arrived. Ralph, the manager, printed out a thick "Cheesecake Hazard Zone" sign and taped it to the floor where the dessert had splattered. Joyce drew a cartoon of a flying cheesecake on the staff bulletin board with the words, "Never forget." Ethan tried to keep his head down, but customers kept bringing it up. "Oh my gosh, you were here yesterday, weren't you?" one older lady asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "Was it really that bad?" another whispered, like she was asking for classified information. Ethan smiled politely through it all. "Let's just say I won't be eating cheesecake for a while," he'd reply, which always got a laugh. But the truth was, something about the whole thing stuck with him. The anger that woman had, it wasn't just about cake. It was something deeper, something heavy and bitter that had been waiting for an excuse to explode. He'd seen flashes of that kind of pain before, not in customers, but in people who felt invisible, unseen, or unheard for too long. Later that week, as the story hit the local news, Harlan's saw a spike in visitors. Folks who never shopped there before came just to see the famous store where the cheesecake lady lost her mind. Ralph rolled his eyes but didn't complain. The sales numbers were up, and laughter was good for morale. Ethan started noticing patterns. Some people came in joking, filming themselves holding cheesecakes like it was a tourist attraction. Others came in angry, ranting about entitled people ruining things for everyone. Everyone had an opinion, and somehow everyone knew what they would have done differently. He found it strange how one moment of chaos could turn into a town-wide spectacle. By the end of that week, the police report came out. The woman's name was Cynthia Dale, age 46. She lived just 15 minutes away in a small cul-de-sac near Riverbend Park. Turns out she'd recently lost her job at an insurance company. Her husband had left the year before. The news said she was charged with disorderly conduct, criminal mischief, and trespassing. Reading that hit Ethan differently. He sat in his car during his lunch break, scrolling through the article, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. Everyone else was laughing about her. But for the first time, he didn't feel like laughing. Sure, what she did was wild, maybe even dangerous, but he couldn't stop thinking about what it must feel like to have your whole life fall apart and then suddenly lose control in front of strangers. He wondered if she'd even remember what she'd done, or if it would just be a blur of anger and humiliation. That night, he mentioned it to Lena. "I think people are being too hard on her," he said, sipping his coffee. "She threw food at your workplace and destroyed store property. How are people supposed to react?" "I know," Ethan said softly, "but sometimes folks snap because no one ever listens to them. Maybe she just broke." Lena didn't say anything right away. She understood how empathetic her husband could be.
maybe too much sometimes. Just don't start a GoFundMe for her, okay? She teased gently. Ethan laughed, but there was a heaviness in his smile. A few days later, something strange happened. A young woman walked into Harlan's carrying a small box. She went straight to Ethan's register. She looked nervous. "Are you Ethan?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. She smiled faintly. "I'm Cynthia's daughter." The air seemed to go still. Ethan's hands froze mid-scan. "She just wanted to say I'm sorry for what my mom did. She's been going through a lot. She's getting help now. I know she embarrassed herself and all of us, but I wanted to thank you and your boss for not making it worse than it already was." Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't expecting kindness from the other side of the story. He just nodded and said, "Thank you. I hope she's okay." The girl smiled, tears in her eyes, then handed him the box. "She told me to bring this." Inside was a small, homemade cheesecake. On top, written in shaky pink icing, were the words, "Sorry for the mess." Ethan stared at it for a long moment, speechless. When he finally looked up, the girl had already walked out of the store. That moment changed something in Ethan. The laughter that once filled the aisles about Cheesecake Lady suddenly felt quieter. The employees stopped making jokes, and when someone new mentioned the story, Ethan just smiled softly and said, "She's doing better now." Weeks passed, the story died down. A new scandal replaced it. Something about a raccoon breaking into the diner's dumpster, and life in Maple Ridge went back to normal. But for Ethan, something had shifted. He started seeing people differently. Every bad-tempered customer, every impatient driver, every person who snapped, he started to wonder what invisible battles they might be fighting. It wasn't pity, it was understanding. Months later, the town's local paper did a follow-up story about the cheesecake incident. It wasn't about the chaos this time. It was about forgiveness, second chances, and the bakery's decision to rename one of their cheesecakes the Cynthia Special. It sold out every weekend. Ethan would sometimes look at the display case and smile to himself. He never told anyone about the apology cheesecake, not even Ralph. But every time he saw someone buying one, he felt a quiet sense of peace. Because sometimes life's biggest lessons come from the smallest, strangest moments. And in Maple Ridge, nobody forgot the day a cheesecake taught everyone a little something about patience, compassion, and grace. By the time spring rolled around, Maple Ridge had almost forgotten about the cheesecake incident. The Cynthia Special was still on the bakery's menu, but it had turned from a local meme into something sweetly nostalgic, a symbol of how the town could laugh and heal. Ethan kept working his usual shifts at Harlan's Fresh Market. His days were calm again. He'd come home smelling faintly of flour and detergent, kiss Lena on the cheek, and help their daughter with homework before bed. But fate has a funny way of circling back, especially in the age of the internet. One quiet Sunday morning, Ethan's phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, he thought it was spam. Then he saw the notifications. Instagram tags, Facebook mentions, TikTok reposts, hundreds of them. Someone had posted a video titled, "The Cheesecake Guy Who Forgave the Angry Lady." The video wasn't new footage. It was a simple slideshow. A few stills from the original supermarket chaos, a screenshot of the local paper's forgiveness story, and then somehow a picture of the apology cheesecake with "Sorry for the mess" written in pink icing. That last image, the one Ethan thought only he had seen, had come from somewhere he didn't expect. At the bottom of the video description was a small note, posted with permission by her daughter. "My mom's doing better now." Within hours, the video hit over 1 million views. People were commenting things like, "This is what healing looks like. Faith in humanity restored. More Ethan energy in the world, please." The clip spread everywhere. Reddit, X, TikTok, even small morning talk shows picked it up as a feel-good story of the week. At first, Ethan was overwhelmed. The grocery store became busier than ever. Teenagers came in filming short clips for their social pages, saying things like, "We're at the forgiveness store." Even local TV stations started calling, asking if he'd give interviews. Ethan politely declined most of them. He didn't feel like he'd done anything special. He just hadn't wanted to add more pain to someone who was already broken. But the world seemed to think otherwise. One afternoon, a letter arrived in his mailbox, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single line: "Your kindness saved my mother." No name, no explanation, just that. Ethan sat on his porch for a long while, holding the letter, staring at the sunset bleeding orange across the hills. He realized then that forgiveness wasn't just a word, it was a ripple. You let it go, and it moved through people in ways you could never predict. A week later, the grocery store chain's head office caught wind of the viral buzz. They invited Ethan to a regional meeting, part recognition, part PR opportunity. Ralph, the store manager, nudged him in the shoulder and joked, "Better wear your fancy shirt, hero." At the event, executives spoke about brand integrity and community image, but what Ethan said when they handed him the mic silenced the room. He didn't talk about the internet or the publicity. He said, "I just think everyone's carrying something heavy. You never know what's breaking someone until it finally spills over. If you can be the one person who doesn't throw more weight on them, maybe that's enough." The crowd gave him a standing ovation. That short clip, someone filmed it and posted it on TikTok, went even more viral. Within days, major outlets picked it up. Hashtags like "sorry for the mess" and "cheesecake forgiveness" trended worldwide. Some people started baking cheesecakes and writing their own apology messages on top, posting them with stories of reconciliation, forgiveness, or loss. It turned into a movement of sorts, a digital wave of healing sparked by one strange supermarket incident. But not everyone saw it as positive. A few online voices accused Ethan of milking the moment, saying he was playing saint for clicks. One popular influencer mocked the story, calling it the most middle America redemption arc ever. At first, the negativity stung, but Ethan reminded himself that the internet always finds something to tear apart. What mattered were the quiet messages, like the one from the woman in Nebraska who said she finally forgave her brother after 5 years of silence because of his story. Or the man from Scotland who wrote, "I watched your video and baked my first cheesecake from my late wife's memory. Thank you for reminding me it's okay to let go." That's when Ethan realized the story was no longer about him or Cynthia. It had become everyone's. A few months later, a small production company reached out, wanting to make a short documentary titled "Sorry for the Mess, a Modern Parable." Ethan didn't agree right away. He worried it would feel performative, too polished, too dramatic. But when they told him they wanted to focus not on the meltdown, but the redemption, he said yes. When filming began, Ethan sat in his backyard, hands folded, speaking softly as wind chimes tinkled behind him. He told the story just as it had happened. No embellishment, no dramatics, just truth. And when the producers interviewed Cynthia herself, now in therapy, rebuilding her life, her words brought the crew to tears. She said, "He could have laughed at me like everyone else did, but he chose to see me as human. That one act gave me the courage to start again." When the documentary released online, it wasn't a viral explosion this time. It was quieter, more personal. People watched, reflected, and shared their own experiences. The final shot showed Ethan walking through the grocery store, passing by the bakery section. He paused, looking at the sign for the Cynthia special, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Still the best forgiveness I've ever tasted."
By the time summer rolled back around, the world had changed for Ethan Walker in ways he never expected. He wasn't famous, not really, but people knew him, not by face, not even by name. They just called him the cheesecake guy who forgave the crazy lady, and somehow that was enough. The little grocery store in Maple Ridge started getting postcards from strangers around the world, some written in English, others in languages nobody at the store could even translate.
Each one carried a message that, in its own way, said the same thing. Thank you for reminding us to be kind. Ralph, the manager, taped every single one of those postcards to the break room wall. By July, there were so many that they had to move them into a giant display near the bakery aisle, right above the refrigerator where the cheesecakes were kept. A sign hung above it, painted by local school kids. Kindness lives here. Every day, customers stopped to look, some even tearing up as they read the messages. It turned the store into something more than a place to shop. It became a small shrine to second chances. Meanwhile, Cynthia was finding her own peace. After months of therapy and support groups, she got a job at a local diner. Nothing fancy, but enough to make her proud again. She started smiling more, laughing louder, and even took up baking on the weekends. One Sunday afternoon, she showed up at the grocery store with a small white box. Ethan was restocking coffee creamers when he heard her soft voice behind him. "Hey, Ethan," he turned, surprised but happy to see her. She handed him the box, a shy grin tugging at her lips. Inside was a perfectly frosted cheesecake. Neat, simple, with golden edges that smelled faintly of lemon zest. On top, written in careful red icing, were the words, "Still sorry, but thank you." Ethan laughed, not the mocking kind, but a laugh filled with warmth and closure. He said, "I think this might be the best one yet." And she smiled back. No returns, though. Full price this time. For a long moment, they stood there. Just two ordinary people who had walked through something messy and come out a little better on the other side. The documentary, Sorry for the Mess, eventually premiered at a small independent film festival in Denver. It didn't win awards or break streaming records, but it made people feel something quiet, powerful, and real. After the screening, Ethan was asked to step on stage. The host handed him the microphone and asked what lesson he hoped people took from his story. Ethan looked around the room, at the strangers smiling, at the lights dimming, at the soft music humming through the speakers, and said, "The world doesn't need more heroes. It just needs fewer people ready to explode on each other. If we could all slow down for just 10 seconds before we react, maybe that's where kindness begins." The room fell silent. Then came applause, not thunderous, not dramatic, but slow, sincere, like a standing wave of gratitude moving through everyone there. A few months later, when the hype had faded and the world moved on, Ethan's life returned to something close to normal. He still worked at the store, he still came home smelling like flour and detergent, but now, when he passed the bakery section, there was a quiet pride in his eyes. Not for fame or recognition, but because something he did, something so small, had made a difference. Every now and then, a customer would stop him and say, "You're that guy from the video, right?" And he'd smile and nod, never making a big deal of it. But once, an elderly man with trembling hands stopped him by the cheesecakes and said, "Son, my wife passed away last year. I was angry at everyone and everything, but your story, it reminded me how to breathe again." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder and said, "It's okay to start over." When autumn arrived, the postcards stopped. The viral wave had ebbed. But in a quiet way, the story had never really ended. Somewhere in small towns and big cities, people were still baking cheesecakes with apology messages. Some were silly, some were heartbreaking. All of them were human. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't trend forever. It settles into the soil, into the way people talk to their kids, into the pauses before they yell, into the second chances they give when they didn't have to. And in that way, the cheesecake story never stopped. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan closed up the store and stood in the quiet parking lot. The wind carried the faint scent of sugar and rain. He thought about everything that had happened, the madness, the laughter, the redemption, and smiled to himself. The world could be loud and cruel, but sometimes all it took to change it was one person refusing to throw the next punch. He whispered to himself, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the only kind of strength that lasts." And with that, he turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked home under a sky full of stars. A man who had learned through one wild cheesecake what it really meant to let go.